I'm going to make a really short video. I don't want to lose everybody's attention span. My last ones have been really long and pretty much it's being redundant now. So I think everything that I've had to say has proven itself true. With today, Russia, China, America, all of the nations working together to create nuclear technologies, to create electromagnetic shielding for the power plants that will be sending, to send radio signals or, God forbid, crafts that carry humans into the outer layers of the thermosphere. Everything that I had to say has proven itself true. I refer to all of the previous videos on my page, from the Moon Landing 101, Radiation I Told You So video, to the last video I just posted going off on that, see, all the nations are working together on creating the technology that 10 years ago everyone said was nonsense because Apollo went to the moon. So, now that we're finally acknowledging to leave Earth's magnetosphere you need a magnetosphere on your craft like the Earth's magnetosphere, we're working on building it. Since we're all talking about this now, and this is the current state of space exploration, everybody's discussing radiation again. And I want to touch on just the simple basics, conversions, and why it is that here on Earth what we're exposed to with radiation is completely different than what's on the International Space Station. And what's on the International Space Station and around that area in the thermosphere at 230 miles up is completely different than what's just 3,000 miles up, or let alone on the end of all of the Earth's atmospheric layers at the end of the exosphere at like 6,213 miles up. So as far out as our atmospheric bands go, all the way down to our lowest layers. Then at the, I'm going to touch just a little bit at the end about all of the magnetospheric bands from the plasmasphere to the magnetosheath and all of the polar cusps and everything in between, the neutral points, and how all of these plasma fields create more turbulent areas than certain fields within them, and also why the outside influence creates the majority of that and why we experience it occasionally. So, starting with radiation conversions. Now, the first video they talk about here is the only thing you need to know. But they do stupid comparisons. They use, your one, particle consists of this much energy. It's 1 MeV. And then they use that in comparison to how much force, and energy it is to move this giant inanimate object that weighs a pound or something like that. A sievert, right, is made up of 1,000 eV, so that's electron volts, and so if you have 1 MeV, which is a grouping of electron volts, and then you compare it to another grouping of electron volts, that's an apt comparison. You want to go particle to particle, even if the particle's mass is greater than the other particle. It's still singulars. So, if we're talking about, a cosmic background radiation particle that is coming in and is 500,000 TeV, and it's hitting one particle that's 1 MeV. Obviously, the particle that's 1 MeV isn't going to stand a chance, and you can think of a radio station from a small, station, what you're listening to as you drive into the big city, and it just fading out, and who knows what happens to that energy, that information, those properties. They're not gone, they're just not where they were in the right place, or they're displaced, and so that's pretty much the, what happens. However, that's the electricity, and it just matters what matter is going where. So what we want to talk about then is, well, how much electricity is moving? And so if we're talking about electricity, we're talking about sieverts then, and a human being experiences about 0.01 sievert of energy, of radiation from particles that come from space every year. Now that's not very much. I mean, you get that from chest x-rays and just the sun and basically everything you walk around and, you eat a banana, there's a little bit. We're fine, that's a normal amount. If you were to get into, into the low Earth orbit area, such as where the International Space Station is, that's when you start encountering like 200,000 millisieverts. And now this radiation, this is much greater. This is 20 times the amount that you would be expected to have here on Earth in sieverts. So this 20,000 sieverts that you would expect here on Earth, you have to have a great deal of shielding. Coolant systems, you have to have lead and titanium, aluminum systems, consistently, shielding you from the heavy ionization that that your body's having occurring to you. And so you have to have all these precautions. However, the heavy ones, the really bad ones, the ones that are, greater, that it would be, the 700,000 millisieverts to up to all the way up to a GeV. These ones are not found within the 230 mile area. They're very rare. They're found in the upper Van Allen belt area, about 1,000 miles on up. Now there's actually 3 Van Allen belts, and that's something that my videos have talked about, and I've talked it to death now, that there's a great deal more than 2 bands. There's dozens of bands, they have multiple sets of names and purposes, and they come and go and interchange, and electromagnetic reconnection, blah 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 blah. It's awesome, check it out. However, with these bands working like that, there are only a few particles that actually make it through, and so at the 230 mile mark, only a couple particles that we experience that are of those great amounts come flying through the craft, and we actually are hit by that. So all of the astronauts, they get heavy radiation treatment when they get back, and they have to do it continuously for a great deal of time because they're exposed to a great amount. So even though we're thoroughly protected by passive shielding, the electromagnetic shielding from the Earth, the magnetosphere that we know we need and are working on trying to build on our crafts to go higher up and also save us from where we're at for longer periods of time. So when someone says, oh man, space isn't that, the particles are so rare you'll never encounter a 10 GeV particle, or oh, those 500,000 TeV particles or 100,000 TeV particles, you'll never encounter one. And absolutely not, if you are only 230 miles up in the lower thermosphere. However, if you start going any higher up, your odds of encountering that increase severely, such as if you were to just go to about 1,000 to 3,000 miles up in the mid-thermosphere, where no humans are, where we've lost, and where now the Hubble is now at. If you were to be in this area of space, the thickness of the atmosphere, the density of it, the ionization levels, because of the ionosphere bands that are occurring in it, they're about equivalent to Mars. So it's about 700,000 millisieverts at that point. Now, if you take note of the GSI and all the presentations that have been put forth now and all the confirmation as to why we need electromagnetic shielding, bottom line, all the radiation exposure amounts are talking about the lowest levels, and they're using ill comparisons. Now I want to end this video by talking about this last one that they just put up, and they're talking about how long does it take, is it like Hollywood, blah 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 blah, because as I just talked about, it takes a long time. It's disgusting, it's slow, it's painful, it's gross, it's sad. So, what am I talking about when I'm saying these greater amounts of energies? Well, these are the amount of energies that we haven't encountered. This is what the space monkeys and the shit from the early 50s and 60s, they got to encounter when they just kept going. First, their neurology at about 1,000, 15, 2,000, 3,000 miles up started to just fail. Those little sparkles that we see at 230 miles up, and they saw really bad at 358 miles up at the highest shuttle mission, they just shut your brain down 1,000 miles past it. That's why Apollo 13, they got sick, they had, pass out issues. All of this was, the 2 or 3 of them died of the cancer that we're talking about you will get if you hit that level of radiation. So, and it's irreversible even with all the treatment, 700,000 millisieverts, you cannot reverse that. And the amount of particles that are up there, again, if my finger has, 7 times 10 to the 24, hydrogen particles for this 1 cubic inch, well, for up there, again, the 1 MeV comparatively to potentially 10 GeV or greater, all of these particles, 1 to 1, there are 1 particle for every 3 to counter mine. So for every cubic meter that I step towards the moon, in that great amount of 700,000 millisieverts, I am ionizing 1 of those 3 cells in my entirety of mass to the mass that I am encountering. It's an impossibility to make it there and back without, you'll be completely ionized. So first you die of neurological failures, you just pass out, and that's the end of you. That's it. And then you just keep on drifting up, and then eventually you get bubbly and fluish, and you start breaking down until you hit the plasmasphere and these outer layers we've never encountered before, where the Parker probe's going. We're going to try to redo the Genesis mission and touch a raw particle, because only CERN and GSI and these labs have told us what this particle is like, and they've created it, but we've never actually touched one. So, if we actually touch one, the flesh actually touched one, when you start hitting the 10 GeV plus, it's no longer slow. Now we're talking about it is fast, and it is extreme. It is using the mass that is everything it can strip with those free radical electrons. Any biradical that's in the area that can break apart, any mass that is left from oxygen or carbon, anything it could tear off of something, it's going to whip it around and tear through anything that it can at speeds unfathomable, because as you hit these turbulent plasma areas, it is the field in which that will be passing through you as you pass through it. And so, all of these heavy amounts of electricity that we're talking, 10 GeV, 55, 75, 255 GeV, we know what will happen. Anatoly Bogowski is proof. He is the only human study that has ever shown what happens when that volume of energy controls mass at speed. And that was a bullet through his head. Look him up, Russian Anatoly Bogowski. He's a showstopper. So, he had a particle go through his head, about 76 GeV worth of energy, common energy for the areas in which these electromagnetic fields have all this turbulent plasma. So, all the way up to 500 TeV, these particles can be found, moving at speeds up to the speed of light, all matter having to move up to what that manipulation of magnetic reconnection is. So during all of these, reconnective points, as it starts to speed or slow or do all of these as we pass through it, it passes through us. It's going to just start passing that like a bullet through Anatoly Bogowski's head. Sure, as it passed through, it went all the way through, but it went all the way through and made a bullet hole. Now, everyone was like, well, he didn't die of radiation poisoning. Well, no, he didn't, because everything the particle touched, anything the electricity moved out of the way and the particle touched, disintegrated. And then it closed back up from inflammation, and they had to worry about the surrounding tissues and whether the ionization from that particle passing through was going to cause those cells to be ionized and decay. However, we found that no, it passing through is okay. Now, if it would have stuck in him, that's a different story. Embedding one of those protons, that's a heavy isotope. Good luck waiting for that thing to slowly decay away, or getting them to core it out of you, or use its cores on, using energy and particles, similar to try to eradicate it. That's not very likely. It's not going to happen. You're going to die of that cancer. So he didn't, though. It went all the way through. People have survived bullets to the face that have gone all the way through, just like that. He was paralyzed, just like you would a bullet to the face. However, he survived the radiation sickness because it didn't stop. It just opened him up. So we'll survive the radiation sickness, but they'll start going through us as the speed, because of the electricity and the volume and the speed that moves that mass, will start to increase at velocity and rates that we can't fathom here on Earth, nor can we fathom in low Earth orbit. So, as we're pressing out, Anatoly Bogowski is the only proof that we have to show that without electromagnetic shielding, causing the electromagnetic forces that are forcing matter through our crafts, causing ionization to everything that it touches, stripping things, why a comet has a tail, ripping matter off. As it starts to do this, throughout all stages, as it goes up till it gets to the 100% outside of the bow shock and is just within the heavy mass of particles from the sun and the cosmic background, and it's not shielded at all, not even within just some turbulent states, but at all, well then, we don't stand a chance. We're just dust in the wind. Literally, stardust all over again. Our comet will and then just be a chunk of carbon with nothing left to blow off. And that's it. So, radiation, that's it. Radiation 101. We have particles that are 500 TeV. Now those can encounter particles that are 1 MeV. If you look that up and if you understand what I'm talking about, and you aren't going to be condescending and you actually are going to decide to talk about the science of relative 2019, then cool. You're going to learn something about why it is that we have stopped where we have, even though we've been in space for 60 years, we've stopped where we have and we cannot go past it. You're going to learn why that radiation level is different and why the difference between where we are and just above us is so extremely different, and why from right there to outside of Earth's magnetosphere is unfathomable. Where I'm throwing out numbers that you might be having a hard time with, that's numbers that our solar physicists cannot seem to even fathom. So we're not going to the moon anytime soon. We're not going to Mars anytime soon. Everybody in the world now is acknowledging that we need active shielding and we need these propulsion systems to create enough energy to make that, to go to the moon and to go to Mars. So that's where we're at. And that's the end game. That's the showstopper, as they continuously said for the last 6 years now. That's it. Radiation. Showstopper.